Before we get into this episode, there's something that might be of interest that I wanted to tell you about. Scene and Heard, who run this podcast, have been asked by Scotland Food and Drink to undertake a strategic review of the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards. Now, these Excellence Awards have been going for almost 20 years and are a huge mainstay of the food and drink sector. But it's time to ensure that they're still relevant. So if you have ever been involved in the Scotland Food and Drink Excellence Awards, or even if you've ever had an opinion about them, we would love for you, please, to complete our survey. So if you go to the On Farm Twitter, which is at @on_farm UK, and click the link in the bio, there will be a tab in there that will take you to the survey, and it should only take you a very short while to complete, but we would be enormously grateful. Hello and welcome to the On Farm podcast. This is Anna, and I was planning to record this little introduction to the podcast outside with the horses, but I think today is possibly the rainiest and wettest day we've had this summer, so I've wimped out and I'm indoors instead. The reason why I wanted to record with the horses is because this episode is all about equine Pilates. Now, I love horse riding and it's been a huge part of my life for a very long time. But as I start to get older, I've been starting to notice that I've got a few aches and pains, particularly in my hip. I'm not going to lie, I was a bit worried that it might mean that my days on horseback were numbered, but this episode we hear from Jess, who runs a brilliant and very innovative online business offering Pilates for riders. As you'll hear coming up, she's passionate about helping people to keep riding or doing whatever they love, not just riding, driving a tractor, any kind of physical activity, until lunchtime on the day of their funeral. I thought that was quite a nice way of putting it. Even if you're not horsey, I do encourage you to keep listening because some of her tips on physical health will be useful for anybody who's got an active lifestyle.
Hello, my name is Jess Rudkin and I am the creator of Rider Pilates Club.
I need to talk to you about the pretzel that I've been doing in my kitchen. But before we do that, because nobody's going to have any idea what a pretzel is, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your business and what you do on a daily basis, as it were?
Absolutely. So my business is Rider Pilates Club. So I help riders all over the world, all kinds of different riders, to get straighter, more supple, stronger for riding, and also all of the stuff that we have to do on the ground in terms of keeping the horses ticking over and all of the hard work that entails. So it all runs online. I have members, as I say, sort of all over the world: Australia, New Zealand, Scandinavia, Canada, America, loads in the UK. And it just works really well, I think, because people are super busy, aren't they? So the idea of, can you find an hour a week to go to a studio somewhere at a fixed time just isn't going to happen. So, so that's me.
Brilliant. And I suppose the COVID revolution, I suppose, in terms of online presence and online meetings, but also online learning, that will have made a big impact on what you do as well, has it?
Yeah, huge. So I started this during COVID. Not because of COVID, but just because of sort of the timing in my life of, what was going on for me. But I think the huge difference is that lots of people got used to doing things online and their learning was accelerated, wasn't it, in terms of knowing how to log on to stuff and buy stuff and also getting used to seeing into people's houses and working out with somebody who's in their living room and, all of that sort of stuff. So it was coincidental timing, but it means that it's democratized it, I think, for a lot of people.
Could you tell us a little bit more about what Pilates is and how it's designed to help? I mean, I do yoga and I know there are some similarities, but I'm not particularly familiar with Pilates myself. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Sure. So it was actually originally designed and created by Joseph Pilates, which is where the name comes from.
Oh, I didn't even know that. See, I've learned something already.
I know. Well, it feels like, what are these Pilates that we do and why are there multiple of them? So he created it actually as a rehabilitation program for, I think it was primarily for dancers, but for people who needed rehabbing from injuries and particularly things around, the back any injuries really, and for people to sort of restore fully functional movement. So some of it feels like a bit yoga-y and a bit stretchy. The difference between it and yoga is it really focuses on strengthening of muscles as well, in a way that yoga less so. It doesn't bring with it the sort of and different people do their yoga in different ways, but it doesn't bring with it the sort of spiritually kind of side that some people would associate with yoga. It's very practical. He wanted to get dancers back on the stage. So lots of body weight or moving your limbs around and doing things with your core and being really focused on your breathing, and it's very precise. It's about exactly which muscles are you using to do what. The core of it, no pun intended, is really about how you use the deepest foundational muscles, connected right back to your breathing, but very much about how you use and activate the muscles so that everything's really functional in how it works, and you're very functional through the back and through all of the muscles through the torso which support back. So other people will come across it when their GP refers them for back pain, and it's very common and getting increasingly common, which is brilliant, for GPs to refer people rather than just saying, here, take some more NSAIDs or or painkillers, go and do some Pilates. And actually it was back pain that got me to it in the first instance.
Oh, okay. Your own back pain. You were searching for a solution, a non-chemical solution to that.
Yeah, so I'd grown up and I'd always ridden, but as a kid, I rode in quite an uncultured kind of way, in the way that lots of us do when you sort of learn and then just get on with it and you become quite self-taught. So it wasn't really, when I first came to it, it wasn't massively about improving my riding, because I actually wasn't riding at the point at which I came to it, but I'd had back pain since I could ever remember. And it had always been the story in our family that that's just something that the women in our family are afflicted with and need to suffer from.
Right,
And so I would ache most days, nothing, enough to kind of necessarily go to the doctor about, but just enough to affect how I was living. And so I was looking for ways to fix it. And I had my first go at Pilates probably about 25 years ago, back when only slightly weird people did it. And I went along to, I can't remember whether I did it on DVD or went to a class now, but I remember my first experience of it, of the next day, and just being blown away from day one about the impact that it had on how my back felt. And I was like, right, there's something in this.
Wow.
So that's what got me there in the first place, which is why I'm now a bit obsessive about it for people with back trouble, which is most people.
This might be an overgeneralization, but my suspicion is that people in the rural population doing, in some cases, manual jobs are perhaps more prone to aches and pains and less enthusiastic about going to see a doctor to get it fixed. So it sounds as though you have a potential solution, not just for horse riders, but for everybody. But I'm guessing, kind of leading on from that, I'm guessing it's particularly in your case, but perhaps in general, Pilates is no longer just about rehabilitation, but it's also about improvement. So you're not necessarily trying to fix something that's hurting, although in your case your back, I hope, is far better. But it's also about for horse riders, improving posture to improve the way their balance, improve the way that they ride, and I guess the results they get as well.
Yeah, 100%. So yes, to answer your sort of first question about my back, I never get backache now.
Wow.
I can do whatever I want, and it never hurts, which is amazing. Which is I
bet you never thought that would happen if you'd had it for such a long time.
No, I really didn't. And I genuinely believed that it was, there was something anatomical wrong with the women in our family, because that's what I've been told, and we'd always had it. So yes, so then it's more commonly now used just as a really good form of exercise. Yes, people get referred for rehab, but there are lots of people that just really enjoy the balance of it's quite sort of slow and considered. So if you're not a gym bunny that doesn't want to like go and heft stuff around or do crazy hit cardio or whatever, lots of people just like the pace of it. But for riders, it's exceptional. Now I should say that what I do in Rider Pilates Club, because I've also added in gym instructing, biomechanics and personal training qualifications, so that I can really have a it's a bit of a mixed bag of what I do with a sort of Pilates foundation.
Yeah.
So people will go along to it, and the pretzel, which we'll talk about later, people don't go and ask for that in your Pilates class because they won't know what you're talking about. So it really then became a journey. Once I'd sorted my back out, it became a journey of discovery for me. I was sitting on the horse and I was quite effective, but I just felt, why can't I sit quite how I see amazing other riders sitting? Why is it that my coach is asking me to do this thing with my upper leg and my leg just doesn't move in that direction? And and so those sort of frustrations, and I always felt slightly wonky, and we all have, just like the horses do, have natural asymmetry. And so it was then trying to find what was the right kind of exercise and solutions for me for that, so that I could be a better rider. Because I believe now that I have proven through my own sort of experience and lots of my clients that we are better riders than we believe we are, because our body gets in the way and our lack of straightness gets in the way. And when you unlock it, suddenly everything just accelerates. And we can talk more about that. But just to answer your question about people in rural communities and rural life and horse people, you're absolutely right that a lot about our lifestyle is brilliant for us, in that it keeps us so active and purposeful and strong. And then on the flip side of that, it is really bloody awful for us because we do so much of that in a way that's not quite functional, not quite straight.
Yes.
And so we can be really strong, but actually quite crocked.
Yeah, I suppose for so many people, it's about getting the job done and trying to get it done efficiently and taking care of livestock or whatever it might be that you're doing as your job, and your own well-being. And we see this in mental health as well.
Yep.
Your own well-being falls to the bottom of the priority pile.
100%.
But actually, what's that phrase, that saying? And if you don't look after your well-being, then you'll be forced to take time off for illness. You've got to look after yourself, and I suppose the same applies. And I do hear frequently stories of people, they're struggling because of aches and pains and not able to do the job that they want to be doing.
Absolutely. And I think it's, especially as we get a little bit older, by which unfortunately, when you deal with the sort of the science of getting older, is pretty much anywhere over about 35, which is horrifying. Lots of things that we need to work harder and be more conscious in order to, we can't get away with the stuff that we used to be able to get away with. Yeah. So I have a saying as well that, would apply to farming and all of those other things that all of our people are so passionate about, which is, I plan to do this until lunchtime on the day of my funeral. And that means I'm going to need to make sure that I can do it and I want to do it well.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right. We are the worst at it. The animals, the land, the horse, sometimes the kids, and then we're somewhere sort of down here,
Yes,
and it's totally normal. It's because we're passionate about what we do. So most of my people come to me because they want to be, lots of them say it's because they want to be fairer on their horse and they want to be better for their horse. Because it's almost like it's not okay to say, actually, I'd like to feel better. But you know what? It is okay to say that.
Of course it is. Yeah, of course it is. And what you're doing, is working in more ways than one. It's in that you've got a phenomenal Facebook community. You've got a group on Facebook with over 16,000 members, which is fabulous. And they're a hugely engaged and positive group, many of whom have seen benefits as a result of following what you do. So that must be a great feeling, knowing that you're helping so many people. But it also proves that what you're doing is needed, surely.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you for the massive compliment on the community. They're awesome. They're absolutely brilliant. And the scale with which it has taken off and the sort of the depth of what it's meant to people has surprised even me. I found all this stuff to sort of fix my own blockages and issues, and then thought, I really need to share this because this is crazy. This can make such a difference. And, I want everybody to feel like this. And so it has massively snowballed. And as you say, we've got this community on, it's primarily through Facebook at the moment, and lots of people who engage on email. And you're absolutely right. There is nothing for me more rewarding than when somebody contacts me to say, and I get this quite a lot when people say, I actually was thinking that I was going to have to give up. I've made everybody sound really broken now, but obviously these are just, and they're not. I've got lots of, I've got elite dressage riders, I've got, show jumping coaches, I've got, professional coach, I've got all sorts, everybody from, and professional endurance riders and all sorts. But the ones that is probably most passionate about letting me know about the impact are those guys who, a lot of them were saying, I was so uncomfortable, I thought I was going to need to give up, or I had bought a horse and I just thought I was going to have to sell it and get something less ambitious, should we say, because I felt like my body couldn't keep up with it. And now I realised that actually I just needed to tweak a few things, and quite quickly everything is changing. And that for me that's super rewarding, because that's what we all want. We do this because we're all a bit mad and obsessive, and everybody who's listening to this who is a horse person or has horse people in their family will know we're a bit weird and a bit obsessed.
Certainly obsessed,
yeah. So to help people with that, and for them to realise they're better and they can do more than they thought they could do, whether that is one of my clients the other day, I'm working with somebody at the moment who is desperate to get her cob to Prix St George level dressage, which is for non-horse people is the level at which you get to wear the daft tailcoat.
Yes, and a cob. What a lovely sight to see that would be.
Exactly, and and that's hard work on you physically, because they tend to be quite heavy horses, and you need to have quite a lot of leverage through your core to be able to help them up. So it's insanely rewarding, and people contact me every day about different things, and so it's brilliant. I feel really lucky to have managed to bring these people together, because they make it.
Totally. And I'm not going to lie that we've been doing this podcast for 3 years, and there probably have been 1 or 2 occasions where I've had to kind of exaggerate my enthusiasm for something in order to be polite. But here I'm absolutely not, because I just literally said to my husband last week, we were talking about horses and horse transport and stuff, and I literally said to my husband last week, I was like, with the way my hip is at the moment, I might give myself another 5 years riding, and then after that I actually wonder if I'm going to be able to keep it going, because I get a lot of pain in my right hip. But now I feel, and I haven't even started, doing any of your courses yet, apart from the pretzel, which we'll talk about in a second. I now feel as though that there may well be, a solution for this. And yes, okay, maybe I've got a dodgy hip, but I'm certain that there are improvements that can be made by following your course. And so I feel as though, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and really positive. And that would apply to non-horse riders as well. I think everything you've said about healing and about rehabilitation applies to everybody with aches and pains. My husband is an example. He drives a tractor a lot. He says most of the time, if he's got a piece of kit behind him, most of the time his hands are on the steering wheel, but his neck and shoulders are facing the back, and it's always turning to the right.
Yep.
Doing that, for hours every day has an impact.
100%. And one of the things so I have some people who when they join the group, I have some little joining questions that people answer, because it's useful for me to know sort of, just a sense of what kind of riding do people do. And quite a few who will say, I don't ride, but my friend does and told me that I need this. And then I have lots of husbands. They sometimes get referred to as potatoes by their slightly less than endearing wives. Like, husband tried it and he's a potato, which I think means that you can't bend anything in any direction.
Yeah.
And so, we've got lots of husbands that sort of hear from, because obviously, a lot of horsey folk tends to be quite female first, doesn't it? So a lot of the members are originally women, and then we discover that hubby joins in, and then suddenly hubby's like, whether it's as you say, feeling better and able to move better, or sometimes I get really random feedback, like he came back he rides motorbikes, and he came back and said, oh wow, I was able just to swing my leg over the back of the bike without kind of climbing on like a granddad, like I've been feeling like I've been doing for the last few years. There is so much that we can not only correct and restore, but we can get back more than we remember having in the first place.
Wow,
if that makes sense.
That's phenomenal, isn't it? Really, if you think about it.
Mm.
Yes, yeah. Because it's funny you should say about the motorbike, because I do a bit of cycling as well, and I've got to the point where I have to tilt my bike so far over just to be able to get my it's got quite a high bar, and you to get onto the bike, it's practically horizontal. So that's
and you're a horse rider too, so you're always getting on your bike from the left because you can't mount from the right because it feels weird.
Yes, definitely.
So your dodgy right hip is not helping you.
No, absolutely. I can see so many occasions where this could be so useful for people, because we've only got one of these bodies, and if we're in a job or have a hobby that's physical, we want to get as many years out of it as we can, and we need to look after it. And whether that's about so much more, isn't it? It's about diet and all sorts of things. But I think dealing with these things in a way that doesn't just involve popping more paracetamol is so positive.
And you're so right. So I think, it's really natural for us to feel like getting everything right and doing everything that could help us be healthier is so overwhelming, because there's the nutrition and hydration and sleep and all of that stuff that you end up doing nothing, because you're like, well, where do I even start? But actually, the biggest difference that you will get, I think, in lots of ways, is going from zero, i.e. doing nothing like this to help you feel better, to doing something. So people will say to me, how often do I need to do it? They want a structure and a guidance. So I give a structure and a guidance. But I say, do you know what? If you can only manage, so my sessions are always 25 minutes, because I know the thought of finding an hour is just not going to happen. So they're 25 minutes, and that's all in, and and they don't get you sweaty. So you can do them if you've, I don't know, say you work, in an office or wherever, and you need to be vaguely presentable, so you can do it in your lunch hour and all that kind of stuff.
Not too red in the face.
Exactly. And I think, the difference that you can make from going from zero to doing something, you will feel the biggest difference. And it's to your point that, as well as, so your description there, you described us rural folk earlier quite rightly as, geniuses at getting the job done. We just get the job done. Well, you know what? Your body is exactly the same. If you ask your body to do something, it will find the muscles that it finds easiest and the postures that it finds easiest to get the job done for you. And you won't notice for years that you're using completely different muscles on one side of your body from the muscles that you're using on the other side of your body, until suddenly something's really out of balance, or you get on a horse and you're like, oh, why is that leg going that way and my other leg doesn't sit in quite the same way? Or why is that shoulder a bit, and why do I struggle with whatever? And it is because your body adapts to the inputs that you put into it. It's just a system.
Yes.
So you can correct some of those inputs or counter some of those inputs, and it will respond however well entrenched your asymmetry or wonkiness or whatever you want to call it is. It will respond. And that's why Pilates is so useful, because, and the way that I do it is, we always do everything that involves like a limb, a leg especially, or a side of the pelvis. We always do one side at a time, so that you can really tune into how differently it's operating. And you can tell it to operate in the way that you want it to. Whereas if you go and do a squat or something, with both feet on the floor, your body will get you down and get you back up again, and you'll be clueless that it was using completely different stuff on the left from what it was using on the right.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean?
That
so
makes
you train,
sense. Yes.
You get stronger, but you train the asymmetry and the wonkiness in.
Yes.
And so people who are usually really surprised. I've got a friend who does Pilates, not with me, just because he is elsewhere and goes to a class and what have you, and he's a big cyclist, and he needs it because there's a lot about road cycling. He does crazy long road cycles, with his spine all rounded and whatever. And he grew up, he's a farmer's son, grew up heft in bales at the age of 10 or whatever, so has done various things to knacker his back as a kid. And he's doing Pilates, and he's like, it's kind of mad. I'm just moving this thing like an inch or 2 inches, and suddenly everything feels different.
Wow.
So people are really surprised by how it's retraining those tiny little instigations of the movement.
Micro things, yeah. Would you say that what you do is suitable for children? Because my 9-year-old daughter is very into pony club and riding.
Yeah.
But often if we go for a long hack, she'll say at the end of it, or even halfway through, my back hurts, Mummy, my back hurts.
Okay.
And the other thing she often says is, my stirrups are not the same length. And I look at them and say, well, they are the same length. They might not feel the same length, but they are the same length.
Yeah.
So I'd quite like to encourage her to take part if it's safe for growing
totally
bodies.
Safe for growing bodies. Yeah, absolutely. So really with growing bodies, the only thing we really want to avoid is primarily sort of heavy weight related stuff, which is absolutely nowhere near what we do. And brilliant for, if somebody had introduced me to this at age 10 or 11, I never would have had any of those back issues. I probably wouldn't have done it because I'd have been like, why do I need that? Because I needed the backache to find it. But brilliant for kids. And that description that you're just giving about feeling like one stirrup is longer or shorter than the other, which if you then extrapolate that out to what am I feeling in my body? What I'm feeling in my body is that one leg is shorter than the other, right? Because the stirrups are level. Yes. That comes down to what's going on in your pelvis. It's very, very rare for people to have an actual anatomical leg length difference. But it's just the muscles on one side of the pelvis are sort of holding it slightly higher in the hip and rotating it slightly. And so that is what the pretzel is for. So she needs not only all of Pilates, and she'll thank you for it later, but introduce her to the pretzel.
Right, so we can't mention the pretzel again without explaining what it is.
Okay, I'll give it a go. Right, so in essence, so everybody has a pattern of natural asymmetry in their pelvis. So we have muscles that control whether the leg's coming in and out, right? And they also get a bit involved with the moving forward and back, because actually when your legs move forward and back for cycling, running, walking, whatever, there is a little bit of rotation of those thigh bones going on as well. You don't notice it, it's tiny, but they get involved in that as well. And these groups of muscles on either side of the pelvis, I call them the smaller glute muscles. So they're all the glute muscles that are underneath your big, what you think of as your glutes, like your butt cheek. And they have their first action. This will make the pretzel make sense in a minute, I promise. Their first action is about whether the leg is coming out or in, sort of away from the body or closer in underneath you, sort of bring your feet together. But they also have a secondary action, which is to rotate the knee either out or in. And what happens with our natural asymmetry in our pelvis, and we all have this pattern, is that on one side of the pelvis, one of those muscles is doing more of the share of the work, and on the other side of the pelvis, another of those muscles is doing more of the share of the work. So what you notice and what you get is it feels like one leg is slightly, when you ride, so one thigh. So if you imagine, and non-riders can imagine this too, so you're sitting astride a horse and you look down and you can see that perhaps your left thigh is nicely rolled in with the knee pointing forward and the toe pointing forward, and it feels nice and long hanging underneath you. And then maybe your right, the knee is slightly further away from the saddle and the foot is slightly further forward, and that leg will feel shorter. So for your daughter, everybody has this to one side or the other, and to a greater or lesser extent. And I sort of knew I had that pattern, but I didn't know what was causing it. And then I got introduced to an elite equine physio, guy by the name of Andy Thomas, who was sort of the team physio for the US equestrian team and stuff. Wow. And he explained this pattern to me. I'm not going to pretend I discovered it, because all full hat tip to him. And he did some manual release on me to release my piriformis muscle on one side, which is one of those small glute muscles. And it's where people will quite often know it, because they'll get, and lots of people will get sciatic pain and get told they've got piriformis syndrome, right? Sciatic pain is not always piriformis, but quite often. And he manually released it using this, like a particular sort of resistance technique. And I got on my horse 2 seconds later and my right leg felt 6 inches longer. And I was like, what magic is this? So I then needed to find a way to achieve that level of release when we're on our own, right? Yes. Because we don't always have an elite physio. In
the spare room.
No, exactly. Just to twang us up before we get on the horse or whatever it is we're going to do. So I then went looking for, and I knew that if I left it for a few days, this pattern would reinstall itself in myself, and I was testing it on me. And I was testing and trying all sorts of different ways that people were saying you could get into this muscle. And some of them sort of got a bit there, but not quite. And eventually I sort of evolved this stretch, which involves sitting on the ground with one leg crossed across the other thigh. So it looks to some people like, if you went away and Googled, a glute stretch where you sit, or you've been to a gym and you've sat on a mat and you've crossed one ankle, bent one knee and crossed the ankle across the opposite thigh and sort of turned your body into it and hugged your knee into your chest, right? And you get a nice sort of bit of stretch through the glutes. Mm-hmm. So it can look to the uninitiated a bit like that, but you're more bent, you're more curled up. You're much more curled up. You've got a seat bone coming up and you're contorting yourself slightly. It's like you've tied yourself in a little knot. And the reason why it's called the pretzel is I was doing it one day and my other half walked in and he went, "What the hell are you doing? You look like a pretzel." And so the pretzel was born.
Perfect.
And it's a very difficult muscle for us to get into, and it hangs on bloody tight and takes forever to let go. Mm-hmm. And so this is a position that I have found that we can use to get in deep enough to get that particular muscle to release. It becomes famous in Rider Pilates Club because it's one of the first things I get people to try, because although some people can't do it at first because you do need to be a little bit bendy to be able to kind of, get yourself tied up into that little sort of knot shape. When you feel you've hit the spot, it is like nothing else in terms of, I didn't even know there was something there to stretch. And people can really notice really easily that was tight as hell on the one side and I felt nothing on the left. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, great. And that's not always that way around. It's so instructive for people about what's going on below the surface. And sometimes it takes a few weeks of repetitions. Sometimes people get like a whoosh straight away and it goes. But when you manage to get that blockage to clear, that tightness to clear, you get that feeling that I got when that physio released mine for me manually, and you get back on, which you're like, oh wow, that's where my leg's meant to be. So that's the pretzel.
That's the pretzel. Well, yeah, I definitely noticed a difference on one side.
Great.
The first side that I did, so that would be sitting on my right leg. I noticed much more of a stretch on that side, and then when I switched, it was less noticeable. So yeah, it just shows, doesn't it, that there's definitely a difference. And I didn't quite hold it for long enough because I needed to prepare for this podcast.
You can be there for ages. Like sometimes I say to people, if you can bear to stay there for 5 minutes a day until it goes, then please do. Because when your body's got tightness like that, people think of it sometimes like, here's a muscle that's physically short, and therefore I need to pull at it, I need to stretch it, and this is what happens. And this will happen with people who aren't riders and aren't necessarily coming at this. They just maybe they've got tight from driving the tractor, or from sitting a lot, or from a long drive, or from carrying something, or whatever. And you imagine that, the muscle is short and tight, and therefore if you pull either end of it, it will get longer. And that's sort of the mechanism, but it also really sort of isn't. When you've got really long-term acute shortness and tightness and overwork in a muscle, what happens if you try to start pulling at it too much, if you get a bit alpha about it and you sort of pull at it a bit hard, there are sensors I won't use the sort of physiological terms because they don't make any sense. I'll just use my sort of terms for it. There are sensors in the muscles and the tendons that attach to the muscles, which are designed to notice if the muscle is coming under stretch pressure, and to protect the joint that muscle is attached to. So if you start to pull at a really tight, overworking muscle, those sirens go off and they say, we're getting pulled, and it's going to pull the joint and it's going to destabilize it. And they are programmed to send a message into your central nervous system that comes back out and says, oh God, there's a pull going on there, in which case you better hold on bloody tight. And so actually the muscle, like a horse, I don't know anything about cows and stuff, but like animals, if you pull at them, they'll pull back at you. Yes. Your muscles do the same thing.
Yeah.
So
resistance.
Really... Exactly. So you can't physically, and they're all bigger and stronger than us. Mm-hmm. So there's you can damage a muscle by stretching it, but so what you want to do, and the approach that we use when we use stretching, and we use lots of stuff that isn't stretching, because for lots of people stretching isn't the right answer. But when we do use a stretch, it's about going to the edge of it and asking the muscle to let go and saying, I'd like you to get longer, and then waiting and giving it time to send those signals backwards and forwards. Go, are we in danger? Oh, I think we're all right. I think we're probably okay. Do you see what I'm saying? Whereas if you go, oh, Christ, my back's really bad, and you give it a quick tug and hope that it's going to fix it, you're just encouraging it to get tighter.
Yes, that makes total sense. Total sense. So how can people become part of your community? How can they learn from you? How does it all work? You know, as you've said, this is all online, so it doesn't matter where our listeners are, they can engage with you. But how do they do that?
So probably if you use Facebook, that would be the place to find the community, and you're very welcome in the community, whether or not you're horsey. You just have to put up with a lot of horsey women waffling on about horsey stuff, and some horsey fellas as well. But you're very welcome. You will find it by searching for Rider Pilates Club, which is a group on Facebook.
Yep.
And then just fill in the little joining questions, and it's just helpful for me to know. Then if you ask me a question later, I can make sure I'm answering it in the best way for you. And the way that my courses work is, as you say, they're all online, and they run in sort of 8-week blocks. All of the classes that I do are recorded, so nobody needs to join at a fixed time.
Oh, perfect.
Because it's not going to happen, is it?
That's going to suit the farmers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 2 new sessions released each week, but you can do them at any time and repeat them as many times as you like within the course to suit yourself. But they do work with sort of start and end dates, if that makes sense. So I have a group of people moving through a course at roughly the same time.
Yeah.
And probably the best, if you're not on Facebook, the best thing to do is to go to riderpilatesclub.com and just leave your email address there to get on the email address list for when I next open up either the courses, or your best bet is to have a go at the free 5-day challenge that I do every couple of months, which is just a free chance to have a go with it, get introduced to the pretzel.
Yes.
And I also think your husband probably needs Pretzel's friend flip top head and face smush, which come on day 2 of the challenge. I'll send them to you. You can have a go with those. So yeah, and just join in with the group, join in with the challenge when it next comes up. So riderpilatesclub.com to get your email on the list, or Rider Pilates Club if you're on Facebook.
Brilliant. I think that's been so interesting, and I feel positive now that my riding days might not be as numbered as I thought they were, which is brilliant. But also, speaking on behalf of the non-riders as well, I think if you've got any aches and pains, which defy anybody that doesn't, that says they don't have any, Pilates could well be the solution for you instead of painkillers. Or, not that there's anything wrong with painkillers if you need them, but it's something to investigate for certain. So I'm really glad that we've spoken to you.
No, you're so right. There is, and you'll find Pilates everywhere. It's all over the place now. If learning online or being around a load of horsey women doesn't sound super appealing to you, then, please do seek it out, because there is so much that we can do to help ourselves.
Yes, I think that's the key message, isn't it, really?
Huge.
Yeah, we've got the power to help ourselves to a large degree, and that's a really, really, really positive thing.
And it doesn't take a lot. Genuinely, going from 0 to doing a bit will make the biggest difference for you. So, if you can fit in 20 minutes a couple of times a week, you will make a big difference.
Amazing. Thank you. So that was really great speaking to Jess Rudkin there. I, as I say, really learnt something, and have started to do some of her Pilates in my spare bedroom, because it really does make a difference. So there's a link in the show notes to the Rider Pilates Club if you're interested in joining. And do remember, it's not just for horse riders, although that is what Jess specialises in. So check out what she does. It's obviously very clever stuff. And thank you very much for listening. We will be back again next week.